Vice Chair, Selectwoman Molly Cowan. Good evening.
Good evening and Happy New Year, Exeter.
And to my left, our clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman. Good evening.
Good evening and Happy New Year.
Our Town Manager, Mr. Rustine. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy New Year to all.
And our Recording Secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening. Good evening. And I'm Nico Papakorstendiz. We'll jump right into public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to step up and give comment to the board. We do ask, though, if your comment is relative to anything on the agenda, that you wait till that agenda item comes up. But if you would, step up to the podium with your name and address. I'd love to hear from you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Cliff Sennett, 84 Park Street, also member of the Energy Committee and the Energy Aggregation Committee. We're not on the agenda tonight, but Russ thought it would be a good idea to give you a quick update of where we are since we missed our last meeting where we were scheduled to talk about this with you. At the meeting a month ago, we presented the plan, you recall, and said that we were going to go wait for our final public hearing and then meet as a committee to adopt it before bringing back the final to you. At that second public hearing, we did get some comments from the coalition, the New Hampshire Coalition for Community Power Organizations, CPCNH, and they asked if they could take some time to review the plan and provide formal comments to us, which they did. We received those on the 27th and met on the 29th, incorporated the comments, and then prepared the final plan, which you now have. But because that was in process, we didn't come back to you on the 13th. So where this stands now is that we've adopted the plan. Our recommendation is that, or rather we approve the plan, and our recommendation is that you submit it to town meeting for consideration.
Okay.
So I just wanted to provide that update. The major change really had to do with our conception of how the program would be implemented. No significant change in the thrust of it or what it would do, but how it would be implemented really in two paths. Either you decide to do an in-town procurement process where you would go through the bidding process to select what's called the broker model and service provider and implement it that way, or you could implement it through the coalition. If you did it through the coalition, there would be no local procurement process, and that's what we didn't fully explain in the plan. That's the change that's been made, along with a bunch of other little changes. So that's the comment. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
So I guess the only follow-up question is, so what we talked about when you were last here was that it was not going to take away from a lot of resources from staff, and that would continue, right? Correct?
And I would say it's even more so.
Okay.
If you decided to use the coalition as the venue for implementing the program, because then there wouldn't even be a procurement process that would have to be undertaken in the town. The coalition itself is a 53A intermunicipal organization, public entity, and it has the ability to sort of cover the public procurement requirements itself. So you're not required to do that.
So based on the presentation that we saw last month and obviously Cliff giving us an update, is the board comfortable with our committee working with the town manager to draft a warrant article?
I am.
Yeah. Yes.
And I am as well. Mr. Dean?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
We will work on that. I have a draft from Ms. Marshall from the committee. She sent one along, so we'll work on that in the next week or so.
And we'll have that ready for the 18th?
It'll be ready for the 18th, yes.
Terrific. All right, great. Thank you.
We can be there that night if there are any further.
That would be wonderful if somebody could be here.
Okay.
That'd be great. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Anything not on the agenda? Okay, and seeing none, and for the record, there are no attendees on Zoom, so I will close the public comment. And there are no official proclamations or recognitions, but I would like to note, we received an email on behalf of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. They congratulated the Town of Exeter wastewater treatment plant on being selected as the 2021 EPA Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant Operation and Maintenance Excellence Award recipient to the state of New Hampshire. And along with that, there's a letter in our packet from Mr. Jason Turgeon. I wanted to recognize and acknowledge that and also congratulate DPW and the Water and Sewer. Mr. Dean, did you have any additional comment?
I just also wanted to add my congratulations to the Department of Public Works and really everybody that was involved in that project. I know that when it came to the warrant and to the ballot, I know Ms. Corson was involved in that, and I think Ms. Sermon was on the board at the time as well, and she's here tonight. So just recognize them and thank everybody, because without all of the community involvement that we had, I don't think it would have been the success that it has become. And it's a great award and great tribute to the Public Works people as well in the department. Well deserved.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the Exeter Select Board regular meeting of December 20th, 2021. And at this time, I would ask the board if there are any revisions or amendments to the meeting minutes. Seeing none, then, I would seek a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of December 20th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And we do not have any appointments this evening, so we'll jump right into discussion items. And first on our agenda is a COVID-19 update. And Chief Wilking, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Select Board, and Mr. Dean. And I'm also going to report for the Town Health Officer. James could not be here tonight, so just to be brief, I wish the numbers were better. They're as bad as they've been for Exeter. We're so proud that our vaccination rate is nearly 80%, and the town has always had low numbers, but after Christmas or since Christmas, we've seen 97 of our residents test positive. Some of that can be attributed to the sheer number of tests that are being done, but regardless, 97 people. We have 101 cases in town that we consider active, and we're running ambulance calls daily on known COVID cases now. A little different than it was in the summertime. We kind of we're kind of just playing it along, but moving along with that, the state has seen some grim numbers as well, with 8,600 patients over the last week. That's an average of 1,200 a day, and you're hearing huge numbers after the weekend. I just want to put it in perspective. They don't give data all weekend, so some of the numbers you hear on a Monday capture Christmas or New Year's Day all the way through the weekend into Monday, so they could sound like we're doing 3,000, 4,000. Well, it's a 4-day number, so that kind of thing. Unfortunately, 75 people lost their lives over the past week, 28 coming from Rockingham County, so it's hitting close to home. The Fire Department, Health Department, and Police have remained highly engaged with the vaccination process. We'll be assisting with the Booster Blitz. It's going to be at the Exeter High School this coming Saturday. I don't have the times on the chart, but you need to be registered to receive a booster. And as of the end of business today, about 4,000 people had already registered for the Exeter location. We can do about 5,000, so time's of the essence. If you want a booster shot there's about 1,000 open spots left for that one Booster Blitz. So James submitted a report today to the manager, and was just talking a little bit about the process of the mask mandate around town in businesses. He receives 2 to 4 calls a day, mostly with people asking about the mask ordinance. Some complaints that, either patrons or employees of businesses aren't, fulfilling their hopefully their obligation to protect us all, and we then protect them. But 2 to 4, there's a little bit of a backlog because he doesn't work weekends, so he tries. So all day today he was working through some of them, the educational piece of that. Anecdotally, he feels about 50-50 the calls are coming in pro-mask, and those that call kind of not all that happy business owners that there's a mask mandate. So just to put it in perspective, there's equal numbers of that he's been keeping track of. And as I mentioned, he's helping. He is the lead vaccination coordinator at the Booster Blitz here at the high school this weekend. So James will be working Saturday at the high school. Police will be doing details. I don't want to call security, but assistance details, make sure people know where they're going in the schools or whatnot. I know Chief Coolin and I chatted today. He's going to be there. The other big thing that we're seeing, the Fire Department Health ran a pop-up clinic today. We assisted in the vaccination of 2 local restaurants. Sometimes the employees in the back of the house can't get out to a clinic at, in the times available, so we went to them today and used up the rest of the doses at the fire station. So we were able to have a few people pop in. We took care of those. We're also seeking more test kits. Most of us have had the opportunity to enroll through the state, have some test kits mailed to you, and you can imagine at the firehouse with 32 employees, we're going through test kits regularly with anybody that's had exposure to family, kind of some symptomatic things. So we're seeking numbers in the 40 to 50 tests, and the state's trying to fulfill those. Same thing, you've asked me in the past about PPE. We had some great PPE. We didn't have a lot of COVID calls. Now we're seeing a spike in COVID calls, so we're burning through PPE at a pretty good rate. We are replacing it. But a question did come up internally from town staff. Can town staff move from a surgical mask, cloth mask, to an N95 mask where you're more concerned about your own well-being? You don't want a greater risk of breathing in, aerosolized particles or whatnot, and we're going to seek some N95s and try to make that work. Obviously, there's 100% reimbursement from FEMA for those purchases. It's just the budget to try to move it forward. And now that it's January 1st, seemingly we've got some monies that we'll be able to move that about. So we will work through that with the manager and other town departments to make some N95s available to those that want them. They're not mandatory, but I know some people do. So that is the end of James's report. I know you got a long night. We'll keep it brief, but any questions you might have or...
Not a question, but more of a comment to tail end on that, if that's okay. We're going to have an insane number of positive COVID cases here and across the country. I mean, that's a matter of fact. And I just have to say, for those who have chosen not to vaccinate, that is your personal choice, but I really hope that those people do what's necessary to protect themselves and mask up. If you were choosing not, it's not my place to force anyone or say that you have to vaccinate, but I really do hope that those who choose not to vaccinate do what they can to protect themselves and protect those around you. There are going to be a lot of asymptomatic cases where young people are going out and they're not going to feel like they're sick. So be smart, be safe, and I really do hope, because the next couple of months are going to be rough. And that's just the reality of what we're dealing with right now.
Thank you.
I thank you, Lovey. And the other thing to dovetail, the last meeting we came to, Town Manager Dean had a report from the hospital, and I don't have that today. But last week, I worked through through Thursday. The hospital is seeing the same numbers that we're seeing nationally. About 75% of the people entering the hospital are unvaccinated. So there are some breakthrough cases. They are treating people that are vaccinated, and they are being released, but we are seeing the hospitals, with a 75% unvaccinated rate. The hospitalization has come down slightly, leading most to believe that this variant is less severe, if you will. However, there is a lot more people with it that are seeking care initially and clogging up the ED and calling the ambulance more. So again, I don't disagree. The more that can vaccinate, the better we'll be. And it takes time for the vaccination to really take full effect. So time's of the essence. So the booster blitz and other places like that will just be helpful. So thank you so much.
Chief, either you or Mr. Dean, have you heard from the hospital since our last meeting?
Not since the last meeting, but we can certainly get an update from them for your next update on this.
Okay.
I have, but it's not on my town email. There are some good signs, that they've had a little bit less over the, between Christmas and New Year's, which is nice. But New Hampshire is still the lowest vaccination rate in New England at 50.9%. They're expecting for the numbers to go up after the New Year's Eve. But right now, they're feeling semi-okay for what they have coming in. The other thing to note that I noted in the message was that when someone presents at the ER with COVID and has to be treated and then has to recover, that the recovery period, even though that they're recovering, are not counted in the case numbers for people who have tested positive. So it's about 30% off the numbers.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, and it certainly takes away beds
Oh, my God, yes.
from those that.
I mean, the numbers that I recall, and you probably heard, I think New Hampshire hit its max at about 480 patients in the hospital diagnosed with COVID, and to have numbers in the 350s leads you to that there's hope that there is bed space that for the people that do have cardiac events and other illnesses and traumatic events, because it's not a very pleasant picture when the ED and then all of the beds that they can admit to are completely full with patients on vents and whatnot that, as we know, don't need to be there. So, well, they do, but it could have been prevented, so.
And there's no one tool. We talked about this the last meeting. It's, we have tools, plural, vaccines, masking, testing, social distancing. If combine all four of those and others, we could be in a better place.
Throw in a little common sense.
A little common sense. Chief, one last thing. If there's anything we can do as a board to help you, not only with getting test kits or PPE or anything else, please let us know.
Sure, we will.
And I appreciate what Mr. Murray has done, what you and the department and the police department have done to keep our community safe. Thank you.
I thank you and appreciate your support.
Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is continued discussion on the Swayze Parkway. And as promised, the quorum of the Swayze Park trustees here this evening. I know you met last week to discuss the Parkway. So, Mr. Chair, if you want to call your meeting to order.
Yes, so I'll open up the trustee meeting at 7:20. Introductions. To my left is Darius Thompson, Vice Chair. I'm Dwayne Staples, Chair, and Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you.
Yes, let me just recap. We did meet last Thursday. We had invited yourself, you were in attendance, and we talked about ideas for the roadway at the Parkway. I have followed the last couple of select board meetings with the correspondence and all, and the conversation that we had last Thursday, Mr. Thompson was not there, but Dave Short was there. We like the idea of installing some speed tables. That was certainly an idea, and I think there were some there previously. We also talked about the letter that Mr. Perkins had sent to you in regards to a sidewalk and some other ideas. The board members that were there are in favor of some type of delineation down the side of the road, not necessarily a sidewalk. And I know there's been several ideas, possibly, some type of pathway that's painted, some type of broken line with maybe some people put in it as a walking path. But I think what we decided was to use the word delineation along there. Mm-hmm. So we definitely would not want to see it closed permanently.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Thompson, I know you weren't at the meeting. Did you have any additional comment?
My only comments would be just getting up to speed on everything, and my personal thoughts about this would be that the delineation makes the most sense from an economic standpoint, and it's something that would have minimal impact to cost, minimal impact to, and maybe some impact on reducing the speed. If there are speed tables or other things put in, the concern I would have would be if in the event that there's an accident on the other street and that trucks need to go through there, will that impede their movement along that route if they need to in the case of emergency? And then the other piece of having the speed tables there or the speed bumps like they have on Lincoln Street, would that inhibit the plows any way, shape, or form if they're doing snow removal? So that's the only issue with that. I would not like to see the road closed, and I think that any changes that would get rid of or eliminate or take away the green space is something that would not be in the best interest for everyone all around, because green space is limited. So,
Thank you for your comments. I will say, Mr. Thompson, regarding the speed tables, when I met with DPW Highway Superintendent, he indicated that a speed table, while different than a speed bump, would not impede plows or emergency vehicles. And you made the analogy to the speed tables that you find on Lincoln Street by the school. So I don't know if that answers your question. The purpose of the discussion this evening was to, again, have the trustees invite them to join us and consider as a board whether or not we want to put or consider putting a warrant article forward this year, whether it be to close the Parkway, whether it be to have some sort of a roundabout or keeping it one way with delineations. And I know we all have our thoughts here on the board, but I'd first like to open it up. I think we have some public here that would like to speak to that. So I think before we bring it back to the board and the trustees, I'll open it up to public comment if anybody would like to weigh in on the Parkway.
Hi, I'm Ann Sermon, 14 Cullen Way. The question I have isn't in the detail of it anymore. It goes back to what I asked a while ago, and now it makes more sense since you are talking about putting it on the warrant. If you, I think at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said you'd put it on the warrant, and depending how the vote went, then you would ask charitable trusts if you could or couldn't do it. Have I got that right?
Town council advised that before we can go to the charitable trust, it needs to go to town meeting.
Okay, and I guess I need to know what needs to go to town meeting, because I'm trying to logically figure this out, that why would we ask the town to vote yes or no if we should close or keep it open if we don't know if, let's say the vote goes, they do want to close it. Mm-hmm. Then you go to charitable trust and they go, sorry, you can't, even though the town wants it. You see, to me, we're doing it backwards. I would rather know what we can do, because if you get everybody all kind of excited and you're for and against, and everybody all kind of, I don't really like that they'd be for and against it, then at the end, say, oh, sorry, charitable trust says we can't do it anyway. I don't understand why we're not finding out in advance if it passes one way, it's okay, or if it doesn't, because you see what I mean? We should know before you do a vote that if it gets voted one way or the other, if it's going to be okay, because that would upset me that I got all these people lathered up and they all ran to the polls and they all voted a particular way, and then a more senior group, the charitable trust which runs this says, sorry, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. So can we find that out before we put this in front of the voters, because that would just really, I think that would upset a lot of people.
So, to your point, it depends on what the warrant article is.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get to, is if and maybe I'm jumping ahead of this, because you're right.
So
but if it's closed or open.
I want to step back for a second. We're discussing first of all, if there's going to be a warrant article that the select board, moves,
right.
Number one. Number
right.
two, what would it be? Would it be to close it? Would it be to, that's still in discussion. But the answer to your question is, if the warrant article was to read to close it, or even to close the majority of it, take away what it is presently. Town council has advised us that before we can go to the charitable trust, we have to go to town meeting. And I understand from a common sense point what you're saying, but I'm also listening to what council is advising.
Right, but I don't know if maybe we're not asking council the right question, because
no, we've been very clear. And
no,
I know, Mr. Dean, if you wanted to, I know you're.
But you see what I'm asking?
I'm agreeing with Ms. Sermon on this one right here. I don't always necessarily agree, but I'm agreeing. Why is it so complicated?
Oh, because of the trust.
Right, but then, do the work. Like, why can't we do that before we do all this extra work?
I understand that, but when we spoke with council, before we can go to the charitable trust, we have to go to the charitable trust to say that the town is interested in doing this.
But the town is interested in doing it.
We don't know that.
Part of the town is interested in doing it. I mean,
But
I understand what you're saying.
You've been
It just
discussing it
seems-
for a year.
I don't, yes.
But again, we're still not there. We don't know first of all, we don't know if there will be a warrant article, and if there is, then what it's going to say. And the advice that council gave is that if the warrant article is going to be closing the Parkway, which would go against what the trust says, it has to go to town meeting first before we can go to the charitable trust.
What has to, see, this is the part you're getting,
My recollection.
what has to go?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my recollection was that charitable trust would work with the town. That is part of what the conversation was at that level, and that's my understanding. So I realize it may not answer Ms. Sermon's question in total, but that's, to your point, that was part of the process, that the town vote would support going to charitable trust,
Right.
then proceed with the process.
And council had already spoken with charitable trust to determine what it would take and what the steps would be.
But with the
that's-
questions that were asked, see, since we don't, and I realize I'm not privy to what those conversations were, but to me, the key when you work with council, because I work with the council a lot.
I do too.
Is asking, I understand
Right,
that.
yeah.
Or even if I didn't, you have to ask the right questions. If you don't ask the questions that you're looking to ask, then, and I'm not criticizing, I'm saying maybe someone isn't asking what you need to ask, because as I said earlier, I think if you put something in front of the voters, by the time, I wouldn't want to put anything in front of the voters that I didn't know, like, what's going to happen at the end. Not, because it's not a citizen petition, this is one coming from the board.
Correct.
So if after the fact, to come back to say, it will look, well, you know what, it will look like you didn't do your homework, even if you did. So
Yep.
you're going to have to be crystal clear on this thing as to how you got there, because otherwise you're
Right.
going to have a lot of concerned people, and just, why don't we just find out before we do it? That's all.
Mr. Dean, and we asked Attorney Mitchell a lot of questions. And some of the questions that we asked are the ones you're asking, suggesting that we didn't ask, but we asked. And Mr. Dean, he did submit to us some draft language of what a warrant article might look like.
Yes.
And my recollection was that the warrant article would spell out contingent on, so the voters would fully understand that that's the next step. It's not like yes or no,
I
close
don't
it
see
or
why we're
open it.
doing that. And I'm not suggesting you didn't ask the right questions. Make no mistake. I did not suggest that you didn't ask them. I'm just saying, or that I'm not
Sure.
putting any kind of word in your mouth.
And because
just
I
saying-
work with council every day, I tend to listen to what council advises.
Well, but you
after
have
I've
to
asked the
ask
questions.
council the correct questions. You have.
Well, I think I did, and that's just my.
Well, we don't know them all. We don't know all the questions. Clearly, this isn't clear to people. As you said, if you're going to put this on a warrant article, people are going to vote, and then, oh, by the way, after the fact, we're going to check. It doesn't, I wouldn't be satisfied with that. I'd be like, once this thing goes on a warrant article and it gets voted on, it better be the way it gets decided.
No, your point's taken.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Jerry Hamill, 17 Little Pine Lane. Last year with their close down, there was definitely a lot of people that enjoyed the use of it being closed down. And I could see, a lot of people going down there, but by the same token, I look at over the years that I've been in town, which has been quite a few, I'm always amazed in the summertime how many people go down there lunchtime, just take a break, sit down there, eat their lunch, that they just enjoy the Parkway for what it is, a place where they can go, get into easy, do something, and then they can leave. The trust was set up originally by Ambrose Swayze for the enjoyment of everybody, not for a select few. It was basically set up for use of pleasure vehicles and for the enjoyment of everybody. And I think that if we shut it down, we're basically taking a lot of that away. I know the older I get, and being in the trades all my life and arthritis starting to come in, I can see myself in a few years, I'm going to need a taxi to get in there if I can't drive in there. And I know there's a lot of people that have that problem right now, too. So I've heard comments on a lot of people that, although a lot of people were enjoying it, there's a lot of people who have not been able to enjoy it. And being that the case, I think there's other avenues that could be explored. But I just think that prohibiting people to get into the park, at least into a portion of it, is against what the Ambrose Swayze actually originally set out to do. So I'm not in favor of it. I'm in favor of looking at other things. I mean, we've looked in the past about putting, a U-turn down by the, down by the shed. We've looked at different phases that can get people in there so that at least if you can get into the Parkway, you can park, you can enjoy it. But I think to shut it down totally, I really think that would be a mistake. And I agree with all the trustees that I would like to see it open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamel. Yes, sir.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Bill Campbell, 111 High Street. I'd like to reinforce some of the things that Jay Perkins had. You have a memo. I'm not sure the public knows all of it. But I know that everybody here, or people that have spoken to this, are all for the same goal, which is to open the Parkway up to make it accessible to the whole town in the best way we can. I would back Jay's suggestion that we put in the speed, what is it?
Speed tables.
The speed tables, yes. So similar to the one that's on Lincoln Street in front of the Lincoln Street School. I think that would work. I remember when we had speed bumps in there. Well, I guess they weren't bumps then either. They looked the bumps to me, but they were tables, and it did slow things down. I think the other thing Jay pointed out, which I think was important, is that if you start digging up parts of that Parkway, you're going to have a real mess. It's going to be expensive because there's a lot of drainage and sewage under there and whatever you pick. And I think we should save some money on that. I would like to see us open it with speed tables and see in 6 or 8 months how it's going. I'm concerned about people, much the way it just was mentioned that by Jerry, that a young couple going down there with, say, 2 children want to sit down and have a picnic or park there. You don't want to be parking at the end of the Parkway or something, so you have to walk because you want to have that car close. By the time you've hauled out all the gear that goes with 2 children that are young, you want to be able to get back to the car if you need to. And so I think it's worked pretty well before with people being able to park down there, and I think that opens it up to a lot of people who cannot kind of maneuver that easily to get there. So I'm in favor of what Jay recommended, and I hope we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Hi, Jackie Bonsi, 8 Lincoln Street. I'd just like to speak in favor of closure of the Parkway. I was over there last weekend right after the snow. Beautiful, beautiful day. Lots of people out walking. A group of maybe 5 kids and their parents sledding on the far end, and one of the dads was like standing in the roadway trying to flag down cars so they don't cream his kids. It's really dangerous the way it is right now. I don't understand why just an immediate closure until this is figured out isn't being considered. Maybe it is, but I think it should be considered because it is really dangerous right now. The pathway is very narrow. It's only wide enough right now with all the snow. Like 2 days ago with all the snow, for one group of people to come one way, and then it has a lot of other people on the road walking, a lot of cars going through more than 40 miles an hour. It's just super dangerous. I don't see a good reason, aside from handicap accessibility. There are a lot of parking lots right at the entrance to the Parkway. People could park right there. I have 2 kids, and I go down for picnics with my husband, as described, and we just walk from our house on Lincoln Street. It's an accessible area. I think, a big financial investment in changing the roadway is probably not in the best interest of the whole community. We could spend money on other projects. And I think something like painting a walkway, a pedestrian area is really not clear enough to people who are driving through there, which most of the cars are just driving through to get down to Newfields Road. There are other ways you could go if the road were blocked for some reason and you had an emergency that you had to get through that way. You could go through that neighborhood on the other side. But just, I'm in favor of closure of the Parkway. I think that immediate closure should definitely be considered for safety, and the current situation is very dangerous. A lot of the suggestions to make it safer don't really seem like they would be effective enough to me without, again, a large financial investment in restructuring that roadway, taking away green space to do so. But overall, an immediate closure would, I think, be a good way to approach this right now. Even right now, there are no slow signs or anything to slow cars down. Slow signs could be placed right at the entrance. You could block that entrance so just a single car can get through. That would at least signal to people that they shouldn't be driving so fast through there. And you could put other slow signs in the roadway so people have to, they really want to slow down as they pass those signs. But yeah, just overall, just really in favor of closure of the Parkway for safety.
Thank you for your comment. But just the board only had the authority, because of the class that the roadway is, the board only had the authority to close it during the governor's emergency order, and we did so for the well-being and health of our community, to allow people to exercise and social distance. So I just wanted to explain to you why the board had the authority to do that when we did. When the governor lifted the emergency order in June, we no longer had the authority to keep it closed for a long period of time. We were able to do so through the summer for public safety, and the public safety being, let's figure out what we can do rather than open it back up to two-way traffic. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of
it's maybe more dangerous right now, or when it snows, it's more dangerous because people aren't walking on the snow the way they might walk in the grass, et cetera, to get around people. I push a big 2-kid stroller, and that walkway is only wide enough for my stroller, so I go on the road because otherwise I'd be kicking people off.
I appreciate it. Selectwoman Montriola?
Just, I don't know if we've discussed this before. Dr. Fonsi makes a really good point that, the biggest issue I think that we're all facing is the safety issue. It's not just we want to take away access to as many people as possible. This is a great place. We want everyone to have access, but priority is about safety. Similar to what they do on street schools where they say there's no through traffic during certain hours of the day. Is that something that we've ever considered? Because that still falls in line with cars can come in to park, to sit, but you cannot use that as a throughway. Is that some sort of compromise that could be a possibility to at least test out?
It's worth, anything and everything is worth investigating.
And, because the park technically is closed off after hours anyway for pedestrians, then those hours, if people want to use it as a cut through to drive through, that's a possibility. But obviously, if you're going straight through, because that's usually what's frustrating to me. I'm team close it, but I understand, the alternative side. When I'm driving around on the adjacent street that parallels and I see another car that cuts through and I'm like, why are you cutting through when you could easily go over? Why would you do that? And then they're coming out, faster at the same pace that I am. That's where you see the frustrations. Now, if people want to come in, park, sit, hang out, and then leave, I think that possibly can ameliorate some of the issues that, we're having with the people speeding, and I don't know, it's not going to cost any more than putting some signs out.
It's a small number of people that are doing that. Most people are just passing through.
Exactly. So if it's clearly stated that this is for vehicles that are utilizing the space as their recreational vehicles, and they're utilizing it to park and recreate, relax, then you can do that. But if you are using it as a cut through, you are now breaking the law like you would if you were speeding through a school zone or cutting through any other place that's not meant as a cut through.
No, and I see what you're saying, but then that gets back to the question, Mr. Dean, doesn't it, about the class of roadway that it presently is? I mean, I think we'd still have.
Right.
That's the legal hurdle there.
It feels like less of a legal hurdle than what we're trying to battle with, the needs of everyone involved.
And I don't disagree.
I mean, I think it's something that I would at least, before we, it's a question to ask, and, perhaps council in all their knowledge would be able to at least assist us in the classification of that. Does that fall within?
Mr. Chair, maybe ask a question. I'm curious as to what that would look like.
In terms of what, the roadway?
The vehicles and access to the road and what kind of access they would have.
You have a sign that says this is not a throughway. Cars can only access if they're parking and staying. So I can't fathom anyone, just because they want to cut through, park, sits for 2 minutes, and then takes off full speed. It's not a throughway.
Right. And I think I'd just go back to the chair's original assertion from town council about the class of road and how it cannot be, you can't prohibit public access to the road.
But you're not.
Well, I think it's a question we could ask.
No, you're not prohibiting public access. You can still access it. You just can't use it in any way, which form you want to. You use it for what it was meant for, which was recreation, right?
See, and that's the part where I stumble, because I would want it open only for those that are not able to walk in. And that's why, I've said over the last couple of meetings, let's throw different ideas and different options out is what we're doing.
But you do that, then you start to question who is able to walk in. I sprained my ankle. Do I have to show you?
Oh, no. I don't mean that. I just think we as a board have heard from folks. We've heard from plenty of folks that want it closed, but we've also heard from folks that want it open because that's the only way they can drive in to sit down.
And that would be open for them, and it would be safer for everyone who's asking. The reason they're asking for it to be closed is because it's not safe for cars that are just using it as a throughway. It doesn't hurt to find out.
No, I agree, I totally agree with that. And so how would it be, I'm envisioning it, if it's not a throughway?
Can I make a?
Yeah.
I want to take your idea and go a little further. Because I also have been on team close the whole thing down since I got elected. And I've been listening and moved a little bit, moved a lot, moved an entire, not close it down. I want to see access to people who can only enjoy the Parkway with some help in getting there. And I've been thinking about it, and Mr. Campbell brings up a good point. I mean, I was a mom of 2 young kids by myself, was a single mom, with 2 young boys running around the Parkway, and it was a lot of work to wrangle them. It's always a lot of work. And there was only, when I was thinking about this, when I was trying to figure out how to come up with a warrant article, because that's what we really have to do tonight. We have to decide if we're going to put a warrant article on together, how we're, if there's going to be space. We don't have to decide on the wording, I don't think, exactly yet, but we have to do that pretty soon. So my proposal would be to close access to a throughway entirely. Like, I think that painting a line, having access, speed tables, I'm not interested in that because I think that defeats the purpose. And so I think the other thing that I have been really listening to is people who say they cannot have access to the Parkway unless they can drive their cars onto it, which I understand. I can appreciate that. So what I would do is I would propose we have a few number of parking spaces. We only have access from Newfields Road, and then we have a turnaround, and we don't even need to spend any money. You can do a 3-point turn. There can be like 4 parking spaces at the end of the Newfields Road entrance on the right. Turn around and go out the same way. And before the gazebo, so there is all of that Parkway that is going to be closed to traffic entirely. But You can drive your car in, you can look at the water. If you can get out of your car, you can go and enjoy it. You can walk down to the water. You can see the turns and the egrets and all of the things that are happening there. Sometimes there are baby ducks. It's very fun. And the other thing is, I'm not interested in spending a lot of money because I think the taxpayers have had a big burden. We've just heard about our great wastewater treatment, which I know we had to do, but it's expensive. And we're not even sure that we're going to be able to do this permanently because we have to go to the charitable trust. So I would propose that we make this change. If we have to put it on the warrant article, we can put it on the warrant. And just see how we do.
But didn't we discuss this the last meeting where we talked about having that turnaround and there was not enough space and that work was going to have to be done and that we couldn't dig out? Like, I thought
No, you're right, but that was constructing a roundabout.
Sorry.
I would, just a 3-point turn.
I'll follow up after. Sorry, Florence.
Hi, Florence Ruffner, 5 Pine Street. I know we've talked about all of this, and is there any reason that driveway to the storage shed can't be used as a turnaround? I mean, it's a driveway already, if somebody turned around there. And we discussed all of these things many times, and I just can't see where cars are ever compatible with pedestrians in any shape, form, or fashion. And kids and everybody have gotten so used to having, full run of the Parkway. And like Dr. Bodsey said, the sidewalk is so narrow that if someone is on the sidewalk, like with their stroller, there's not enough room for other people to walk. And I still see a lot of people in the road, which makes me a wreck when cars are going by, going 40 miles an hour, and they speed. And we can't expect the police department to sit down there all the time and stop people. They're too busy. So I think Ms. Cowan's recommendation is spot on. I think it would be a perfect solution. And can the warrant will it say that if the warrant passes, it has to go to the charitable trust for approval? Will it say that?
I believe that's what Attorney Mitchell indicated. Yes, Ms.
So
Ruffner.
people will know that this is not the final say.
Yep.
But I am totally in favor of what you proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clement?
I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those people that be careful walking. This is what you have to look forward to. Don Clement, 5 Thelma Drive. I know that there's a lot of enthusiasm about prohibiting vehicular traffic on the Parkway. And I know a lot of people enjoyed the Parkway because it was vehicular proofed last year. But there were some people who did not enjoy that. I was one of them. I have mobility challenge situations. Mine is not walking, it's not my legs, it's my lungs. And a lot of people don't have the ability, or it's very difficult for them to walk from Water Street, the parking lot there, or down to the Parkway. I know I was really excited this fall when we actually opened up the Parkway. I took a drive down there with my cup of coffee for the first time, parked down there, walked a few steps to the park bench and just sat down and enjoyed. And it's not just about watching the ducks or the terns, it's about being able to sit and relax on a nice spring day or a summer day or a fall day. It's about relaxation. So I think it's very important that we do not close the Parkway, because I think we exclude a subset of the people in Exeter who it makes it difficult for them to get there. We have talked about many years, Selectwoman Gilman knows that, about a concept called complete streets. Mm-hmm. And complete streets is a concept that says you want to share the streets for vehicles, for bicycles, and for pedestrians. If we shut down the Parkway, we have not honored that part of the complete streets which allow for vehicles. I think the idea of a delineation down the middle of the road, and we can do a lot of things inexpensively to do that. We can do a lot of other things to slow the traffic down. I took a drive down there this morning, and there were about maybe 6 or 7 people walking toward town on the Parkway on the other side of the road. Had plenty of room. I was going at a good speed, quiet, respectable speed. But there are things we can do to slow the traffic down, slow the speed down. I really think that if we shut down the Parkway, well, something we're going to regret. We need to keep the Parkway open. We need to make it fair for everybody. I understand the safety issue, and I'd like to see how we can do that. A turnaround is another concept. There's some ideas about the turnaround, but I think we need to accommodate more than 4 cars, Wally. I mean, if I'm the 5th car coming in there, I can't get in. So, I mean, and I know you're just throwing out a number, not a finite number, but I think how we have it right now, and again, I'm not watching it, I'm not observing it every day, I think it's working. We can do things to make it better. We can always make it better, and we can do it for not an enormous amount of money. And I think that's my preference. That's what I would advocate. And I know the board has a decision to make between now and a couple of weeks, I guess, right? A warrant article, but I would just like you to consider that point of view about the mobility challenge would get shut out of the Parkway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clement.
May I say one?
Please.
I understand completely what Mr. Clement is saying, but with the proposal to close it, say, to the storage unit, the building there, that someone can turn around there, you were almost up to the pavilion, and that's a lot of space between Newfields Road and the pavilion. And you could certainly have a lot more than 3 cars there. You could accommodate a lot of cars there. So I just wanted to be clear on that, because it's certainly more than 3 cars.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ruffner.
Do we have a visual representation of a map of Swayze Parkway? Do we have distance? I mean, I'm sorry, I sound very frustrated, because I am. This is 2 years now that we've been talking about this, and I feel like we're talking in circles a lot. And some of the ideas have been brought up a year ago and are now coming up again, and it's acting like this is new information, and I don't understand why. Why don't we understand what we can do in terms of cutting off part of the Parkway to do a turnaround? How many cars can we actually fit in there? What is it going to cost going to be? Do we have to dig up any property to do that? Like, we should have this stuff, and we're supposed to make a decision that's going to go on a warrant, and it just, how?
If I understand your question, I mean, we've been talking about this since sometime this summer.
No, we've been talking about this since I joined the board, when we initially had the conversation about closing down the Parkway, and the conversation was started that that would be a good idea to do indefinitely. Both Molly and I both agreed that that was something that we wanted to look further into. And then when we were approaching the time frame to determine what we were going to do, that's when the conversation dug deeper. We brought in the Swayze Parkway trustees. We were talking to the lawyers. We were then trying to figure out who could translate what the actual trust itself means. We've been talking about this and I just feel like we need some concrete information about what we can actually do. And to Ms. Sermon's point, like, how do we not know what's actually feasible? And we're having these conversations that people are saying, this is what I think we should do, this is what I want to do, but we really don't even know what's feasible.
Well, we do and we don't. I mean, this, if we want to go back in time, there was a prior select board, Selectwoman Cowan, was it your first year on the board? There was a conversation about doing a roundabout when the siphons were being dug up. And Mr. Dean, I believe that you had some information. It got to the board.
Right. We had many discussions at that time about the concept of a turnaround in the Parkway and what it would take. And we had site walks down at the Parkway and discussed cost estimates and
So where are the notes for that?
and so forth.
And
they're in a file.
Cowan or Gilman talk about where that went. I wasn't on the board then, but it got to this level.
It got to our discussion, Dwayne, you may remember, it got to our level, and I think there was a concern about how much of the green space took away, how much it would cost to do it, and were we interrupting any utilities, and it just kind of petered out.
I wasn't a trustee at that time, but maybe Mr. Hamill could talk to that, because I think he was a trustee, but I mean, I just know that it was talked about and then all of a sudden it went away.
I don't know that I think it went away. I think that there was a clear lack of support from a majority of the board members, and so it didn't make sense to keep going.
And then we picked up the conversation once we had closed the Parkway due to the emergency order, and it was between the end of November, early December in 20, where we talked about the possibility of a warrant article, and I had Mr. Dean and I had a preliminary conversation with Attorney Mitchell, and between the pandemic and the budget, we never brought it up as a board until we got to the point where the emergency order was lifted in June of 21, and we had several conversations about how long we could keep it closed for safety issues. We had the trustees come in. I believe you came in end of July.
Yeah.
And we brought you back once Attorney Mitchell opined that the board no longer had the authority to keep it closed, at which point we came up with the one-way compromise for the sake of public safety. The concern of all of the board members was reopening it the day after Labor Day to two-way traffic would have been catastrophic. And that's when we voted to the one-way compromise with the idea that we would continue the conversation throughout this fall and potentially put something on the warrant.
Okay, well, this is the first time that I'm hearing that we had, that prior to my arrival, that conversations were had and there were site walks and...
It was prior to my arrival.
Right, so the fact that we know this now, it would be great if we had the notes from those site walks. It would be great to see what the numbers were that were projected, so that, I mean, where's that stuff?
So one of the options that we were considering throughout discussions this fall were, do we keep it one way? Do we close it completely? We talked about the roundabout. In fact, we went and got the painting that's in Mr. Eastman's office, and we discussed that. That particular option is where you'd start getting into the costs, and I don't know what the cost would be 5 years later, given what the costs are now. But certainly that was an option that we discussed, and I know, that was something to consider. Subsequent to that, I went down to the Parkway with the highway superintendent, and that's what I spoke to a couple of board meetings ago when he described from an infrastructure point why it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to build a roundabout at the New Fields Road entrance. And then from the Water Street entrance, though it could be feasible from an infrastructure point, it could take years because we'd have to get a permit from the state because the water was there.
Was it discussed then doing the entryway from Newfields and then doing a three-point turnaround?
We just brought that up tonight, I believe.
Yes, but we've discussed having that be an entryway and there being parking there. And so this is not, it's a great idea. It's not a novel idea in the sense that we've discussed.
We've talked about it.
Right, and so,
but I think that
January 3rd.
I think that my bringing it up here is like, this is what I would like to see on the warrant article. So this is going to be my motion. I hope that it has a second, and I hope we can vote on it. And then we can work out the specifics of
So my question, Mr. Dean,
whatever is going to be on there.
Selectwoman Cowan has presented an idea on which she eventually would like to make a motion, if I just understood her correctly. And it's an interesting idea, and I think it would be a very inexpensive idea. And I believe you said it was for a trial?
I would be open to it being a trial if we determine that there are not enough parking spaces, that there's not enough room, that there needs to be some sort of construction where we need to appropriate money to do a roundabout or something like that, fine. But I don't want to do that without knowing people are interested in closing down the Parkway, we can proceed with the charitable trust. We can do all of these other things before we start appropriating taxpayer dollars.
So in other words, the trial for the potential, let's say a year, would be to, number one, see if it worked, but also if it did not, or if we could improve upon it.
Right.
How that would happen while allowing folks to enjoy, let's say, 60% of it closed, or more. And then having folks be able to enter from the Newfields Road up to just before the gazebo.
Yep.
And presumably, there'd be the barriers at Water Street, like we had, or something
Like we
similar
had
thereof.
before, and then barriers
At the gazebo. Right after the gazebo, or similar thereof. And there'd be signage.
Yep.
And folks would be able to come in. My question to you, Mr. Dean, is does that still have to go to the charitable trust because you're changing the class of the road, even though you're not closing it entirely? That's a question we need to ask.
Yeah, I think we would need to get clarification on that question.
Ann Sermon, 14 Cullen Way. I also have a question. As part of the warrant article, wouldn't one of the questions also have to be, does the town agree to change the wording of the trust to eliminate pleasure vehicle access? Because that to me is the other part of this. The trust says currently that the Parkway is for pleasure vehicles. So isn't that one of the ways, isn't that the first hurdle in terms of what you'd have to be asking the town or ask the charitable trust to do? In other words, you have to eliminate the fact that you're not going to allow pleasure vehicles in there if you're going to close it. Am I right?
Are you talking about closing it completely or closing it as
Well, that's what I'm asking, because, thing one, when you're doing this article, to get it correctly, what you're going to have to ask, I'm asking, I think is that what you would ask the town to vote on as part of it, changing the trust language? Because I don't think you can do this outside of what the language of the trust says. So you'd also have to, to me, that's part of it.
Well, that's not what Attorney Mitchell advised when we asked him about, and Mr. Dean, do you have a copy of that? When Attorney Mitchell gave us the language that he suggested, if in fact the board was interested?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I will say that it involved discontinuing the way and then Attorney Mitchell left to us to interpret how much of the way was to be discontinued.
But it was not changing the text of the trust.
So how do you get away from the fact that the trust that is the reason the thing formed says there's access for pleasure vehicles?
That's why it goes before the voters and then to the charitable trust.
Right, well, that's what I'm asking. So wouldn't part of your warrant article is going to have to say, I'm guessing, that's what I'm asking, won't it have to say, and we will strike this line like we do with all these things? The line will now not read pleasure vehicles, it will be delineated or whatever.
I don't know why that would be necessary, because we would still be allowing, and I disagree, first of all, that cars equal pleasure vehicles. Like, I believe that this trust is a living, breathing document, and we are not talking about the same things now that we were talking about in 1920.
Right, except the trusts are not living and breathing. They're not living and breathing.
So, but we're not, my proposal is to not eliminate cars on the Parkway. My proposal is to eliminate cars on a portion of the Parkway so that it can be safer for everybody.
Right, but I understand.
I would be really interested in hearing what Attorney Mitchell has to say and not necessarily debating it in public like this.
Okay, I'm not debating anything. I'm asking questions, and a trust by its very nature is not a living and breathing document. That's why you make a trust, because they're usually irrevocable, or even if they're revocable, it takes a lot to change them. And that's why I've been very focused on the fact that this is in fact a trust, and it's not the Constitution. So that's why, if you're gonna start changing wording, you really have to be very crystal clear about what that is. So that's all. I'm not being argumentative or debating anything up here. I really want to understand what exactly it is we're doing here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clement?
Seem to be going a lot further than we thought we were going to go tonight.
Who's we?
We, everybody here, including me,
Okay.
because I'm kind of like, all of a sudden we're going to be a motion to create a warrant article. So I'm part of the universal we, as you are.
Got it.
I maybe lose my train of thought. No, not really. The concept they have of having the entrance into the park coming in one way and have parking is not a, it is a good idea. I mean, we've talked about it before. Many of us were around when we did that potential turnaround 4 or 5 years ago. I know Mrs. Ruffner was on the Parkway trustees. I think Selectwoman Cow and Selectwoman Gilman were, and Ms. Sermon were also on the board at the time.
And just to clarify,
we didn't have any numbers, though. We never come up with any numbers, any cost.
we actually did.
We did?
Yes.
There was.
I wanted to clarify that. We had this conversation in April and May of 2018. That's when those discussions took place, and we actually had Public Works analyzed an option down there for, it was estimated ultimately at $26,000.
It was, okay.
To do that work.
Okay. Anyways, the concept, if we do what is a proposal of having the traffic come in from Newfields Road, most of the community population is on this side of the town, which means in order to do that, for me and a lot of people, you'd have to drive down Water Street and make almost a 180-degree turn into the Parkway. From an engineering standpoint, from a safety standpoint, I don't think that's a good thing you want to do. I don't think you're trying to make almost a 180 turn to get into the Parkway. That's why I think the access that we have now, as a matter of fact, from Water Street is a much safer access. I mean, it would be great if you're coming straight down Newfields Road, go straight into the Parkway. But most people in town don't live on that side of town. They live on this side of town, and they would have to then make that almost a 180 turn across against traffic to go into the Parkway. So I just don't know if that's it's a good safety solution. It's a concept. I just think it has some safety hazard issues to it. Thank you.
I appreciate your comment, but I would also say that most people who are walking are coming in from Water Street. So I would think that would be the access for the pedestrians, cyclists, whatever, and then if you're in a car, you can do the loop. Any other public comment? Before we bring it back to the board, Mr. Chair, any other comment from the trustees?
I'm going to let Mr. Thompson talk, and then I'll talk.
Just a real basic paragraph that comes from the trust agreement. This instrument on the ninth day of August, 1929, is evidence that whereas I, Ambrose Swayze of Cleveland, Ohio, have offered the Selectmen of Exeter, New Hampshire, financial assistance toward defraying the expense of acquiring a right-of-way and of constructing a parkway along the riverfront at Exeter, New Hampshire, to be used solely for park purposes, and the roadway thereupon they're an open only to pleasure vehicles. So the intent of this trust, as I read it, is that he donated land to the select board, the selectmen of Exeter, to use this, construct a parkway for park purposes, not a cut through. So I don't see why there's any big issue with the classification of the road or whatever it is. It is to use solely for park purposes. We have digressed from that to saying that we need to shut it down. It's all important for the region, this, that, and the other. But if you open it up to one way, you're disenfranchising those individuals that have mobility issues or are coming from one side of town. Having it one way and looking at a temporary solution for the time being to try it out, you can get Jersey barriers. They're not that expensive. We may have some, place them along the way. That will slow traffic down. That gives a clear delineation point along, where people can walk and so on. And so that could be tried as a low-cost alternative. Why is there such a rush to put this on a warrant article, get everybody amped up over this, when it would be prudent to look at a long-term solution, try different things, see what works, what doesn't work. But the clear point of if you start to change the essence of the trust, then you need to get clarification. Can that be changed from the charitable trust to make certain that that's clear that you can do that? And if so, what are the implications for it? So again, as Ms. Sermon said and others said, we need to do our homework and think about what's in the best interest for everybody, not any one group or the other, what's in the best interest of the intent of the trust and the enjoyment for everybody. It's accessible, everyone can use it, and it's not just for those that have a car or don't have a car, whether you live on this side of town or the other side of town. It's a park meant to be enjoyed by all.
On that, I agree. Mr. Staples, before we bring it back to the board?
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about changing the language of the trust, number one, if that can be done. Whether we, even if it's in the warrant article. I know that the sidewalk down there, even in good weather, is not conducive to your stroller. It's only about 3 feet wide. You know, maybe we could look at exploring widening that sidewalk, because you're right, it's people coming and going cannot really walk on that sidewalk at the same time. The delineation that I spoke of was not going to be down the center of the road, it was going to be on one side of the road. I also have a concern because at one of our meetings, we talked about that being a Class 6 road. I did some research on that. As far as the DOT goes, it's a Class 5 road. Do we even know if we can do any of these things on that Class 5 road? I don't think we have delved into that enough to know the implications of whether we can or whether we can't according to DOT standards. Yes, it's a town road, but it's classified as a Class 5 road. And if you look at all of the things that pertain to a Class 5 road, have we looked at all of those? You know, when we talk about parking, when we talk about blocking it off. Yes, Class 6, you can do that. Class 5, not so much. So I think certainly, I understand everybody's passion about how they feel about this. You know, I mean, I have my passion and I've expressed it. I think there needs to be a little bit more research done so that if we want to move in a certain direction, we can clearly move in that direction. Certainly, I don't want anybody, you know, I don't want to push my opinion on anybody. I would just as soon say, if we're going to do something, let's make sure we have everything in the right order and that we can do it before we move forward, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and we can't do it. There's plenty of great ideas, but I think we need to do a little bit more research before we actually take a vote to move forward on that.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
One more item too is that we do have the siphon project that's happening.
Yeah.
So the siphon project's happening, that's going to disrupt the road at some point as well. And, you know, so again, we just need to make sure we look at everything, evaluate everything, and then know what our options are, doing all the research ahead of time versus, I think, rushing to do something just because, you know, we need to get something as a warrant article.
Which the road will be closed for some time. I forget exactly how long the DPW told me, but it's going to be closed for a certain amount of time down there when that siphon project is going on.
Great. Mr. Dean, did you have anything quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in with, I know Attorney Mitchell had said at one point, he said that he was looking at the problem from the perspective of what authority there is to close off public viatic use, what we understand to be a Class 5 public roadway. So that is one of the core issues at hand here when we're discussing, do we want to parse it off, cut off just some use or all use, and do we want to discontinue it, or are we saying something different? I mean, I think that those are all different issues.
Thank you. Before Selectwoman Cowan, I know you want to make a motion. Selectwoman Gilman, did you have anything to?
No, I think Mr. Thompson makes a good point in that, and actually both of the trustees, in that the Parkway Road is going to be disturbed by the sewer siphon work that needs to be done, and that will be our test case. There's going to have to be some kind of turnaround configured somewhere along there, but you know, it could be part of the project design.
That's a good point. Mr. Dean, do we know when around that will take place, or are we that far yet?
We're not that far yet.
That far yet.
I'll have to get.
Will it be in 2022?
That's the anticipation, yes.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think they were talking sometime May, June timeframe when I met with them down there.
Okay.
I don't know if that's still the timeframe, but certainly, you're gonna, it brings up a point that you would be able to, I don't think they're gonna close it off at Water Street. You may be able to come in a little bit from Water Street. And you can probably come in from Newfields Road to a certain point. I think there was talk about the farmer's market probably being moved down by the pavilion at that point also. You would have to, if you wanted to make it one way coming from Newfields Road as an experiment, that might be the time, and your turnaround would be at the block building like it has been suggested during the construction. I think that this might be a good time to put some of those ideas into place while the construction is going on, just to try it. Okay. We've got a ton of ideas. It's just what can we find that works for everybody?
Well, that's it, and there's no bad idea. It's a matter of what we want to spend, if we want to spend anything. Safety's the number one priority, and that's legal and making it inclusive.
And I did see the hill where they were sledding too. And I would probably say sledding towards a road, even if you close that, is not a good idea, because there's plenty of room to sled on either side, so I would just kind of toss that out.
There's also a fence that probably needs to be replaced, and you might, if you continue on, you might go in the river, so I would caution against it.
Thank you. Okay. Selectwoman Cowan.
I would still like to make the motion to close it, and especially if there's going to be the construction that's happening down there. It seems to make sure.
I just got handed something by one of the select board members, or one of the audience members.
Oh, dear. Well, all right, I'll keep going.
I didn't ask what they were watching on, but I assumed.
So I think that would be my motion to, and I'm open for.
Yeah, here we go.
I'm open for some discussion or input on how long we want to do this, but I think that now is the time, because I think that during the construction time would probably make the most sense, especially if we want to close the Parkway through the pavilion past that field and have that turnaround piece be where the building is. So that would be my motion.
So is your motion to work with Mr. Dean and Attorney Mitchell this week to draft a warrant article specific to your idea?
That is right.
That's the motion.
That's the motion.
Okay. So just to be clear, the motion is to work with Mr. Dean and Attorney Mitchell to draft a warrant article to close off Swayze Parkway to vehicular traffic from Water Street to the gazebo.
Through the pavilion.
Through the pavilion, and allow traffic to come in from Newfields Road.
With
park and turnaround.
To park and turnaround, yeah.
For a duration, for a period of 1 year?
Sure.
So that motion, what that motion would do would give the ability for us and Mr. Dean and Attorney Mitchell to draft language that we would then introduce at the budget hearing on January 18th when we go through all the warrant articles. Yeah, okay.
If we all agree.
Correct. Is there a second to the motion? I'll second the motion for discussion.
There's, the cul-de-sac idea started in page up? 2016. It's in the select board minutes from that year. That was the first it started being talked about. I guess I'm caught between Ms. Sermon's comments about just consulting with the charitable trust. We'd had somebody, Mr. Donovan, I think it was, that came and talked to us from the charitable trust, but that was all about the money. It wasn't about how to use the money. So that's a different question, as Ms. Sermon said, is that will we be breaking the trust or violating the trust to change anything, basically? I'm going to go back to what Mr. Thompson said, too, is that we're going to have to dig this up anyway and cut off traffic again, one way or the other, or both. I would suggest a different route, I guess, to get there.
Okay.
Do you want to vote on it?
Yeah.
Let's vote.
We will do that, Selectwoman Ratrioli, but when I open it for discussion, I wanted everybody to...
Well, and I have another question, I guess. When is the town allowed to be out of the trust? When did that?
1979 was when the Select Board was given...
Okay.
The Select Board has had the authority to terminate the trust since 1979.
And now I will call the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right.
Motion passes 3-1.
All right.
Mr. Dean will work with Mr. Mitchell this week. And mind you, the motion was to draft a warrant article that we will then discuss on January 18th, at which point the board would vote to whether or not to recommend it to the voters. Before you call your meeting to adjournment, Mr. Chair, did you have any final thoughts?
I would just like to make sure that we actually check on the Class 5 classification of what we can do and all. Because I think that, we talk about what we may want to do with the road, but what we can do with the road might be two different things. That's, and again, I'm in favor of keeping it one way. I think with the construction, we have a chance to maybe initiate the idea of closing it off, depending on how the construction closes it off. But we may have that option without having to put this to a warrant.
Thank you. I'll allow you to adjourn your meeting.
So I'm going to move that we adjourn at 8:25.
Thank you.
Second. All those in favor? Aye? Aye. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank all of you for your comments.
Thank you. Yep.
With,
Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks, Darius. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Cliff.
okay, the next discussion item is a review of the budget and bond and warrant article. We do have two people here to speak to something that's in permits and approvals. And for the sake of their time, with the board's indulgence, I would like us to consider having them present their case to us now so that they can go home at a reasonable hour. Is everybody okay?
I am fine with that.
Yep.
Forgot why I was here. Why am I here? Okay. Hi, I'm Jeannie Wright, and I live at 40 Hampton Road, which is the Exeter Hampton Co-op over, obviously I just said Hampton Road. I'm both a resident, a member of the co-op, and I'm also the board chair, so I will just have to say, I don't envy you tonight. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you for your service for our town. But I'm here tonight as a request. We had a homeowner recently pass away in our community back in June. And that home was a delinquent property tax person in town. And just so I can clarify, our cooperative itself pays for the property taxes on the land that our park owns. We collectively, through our collected rents, pay for the land taxes, and the homeowners are each responsible for those taxes. We've had a long-standing history with the town of Exeter, working with both Russ and Rachel in the town and other folks, really trying to keep people up to date of the status of the condition of folks that are paying their taxes, because it's important to us as well, because when situations arise like this, and somebody passes away, that home was left in limbo because the family knew there was no value in the home. So there was no probate opened. We now have a home in our park that is of absolute no value. We have hired our attorney at the cost of the homeowners that live in our community to file for the writ of possession, and we've gotten statutory sale. We're just about to take ownership of the home, but we don't have any rent being collected on the home, which is going to impact everybody else who lives in our small community. And so we're asking tonight if we could work with the town to release those liens that are currently being held so that we can move forward and have that home removed, and hopefully in some fashion or another put a brand new home in there, providing an affordable home for somebody in town, as well as to gain more access to the revenue coming into the town, because a new home will bring a lot more taxes, and hopefully to somebody who's going to pay those taxes on time. So that's why we're here tonight, to kind of speak on behalf of that. And again, we do appreciate everything you guys do to serve the town, and we hope that you know that we're trying to serve our community as well.
Great, thank you. Mr. Dean, did you want to speak to this briefly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if what Ms. Wright has proposed makes sense to the board, what we would do is do something conditioned upon an agreement under RSA 82A to be able to accomplish what she's asked, and then if you would authorize me, if you're inclined to follow this logic, you'd authorize me to sign that agreement once it was drawn up. So.
Well, it makes sense to me. I'll open it up to questions or comments from the board.
It makes sense.
Yes.
Selectwoman Gold?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want a motion, Mr. Dean, or?
That would be good.
Okay. So the motion would be to claim, is there a,
Are you looking?
is there a map? Yeah, it's right here, is this it?
It is.
It's on the bill.
A16, is that right? No,
That's correct. A16 is
Right.
correct.
Is it going to be a unit number?
Is there a map or lot number, or just the?
That is the full parcel description.
Okay, so the motion would be to allow the town to claim 40 Hampton Road, Unit A16, through the tax deed procedure, which would allow the cooperative the opportunity to gain income, and also the cooperative would in turn agree not to charge the town rent, and further authorize the town manager to sign the agreement.
So moved.
Do we need the RSA number in there? What did you say was-
Can I ask respectfully that be withdrawn and I can give you a motion? Thank you.
I appreciate it, Mr. Dean. I was trying to wing it on this one.
Yeah, the motion would be that, that the board allows the Exeter Hampton Cooperative to remove Unit 8A16 without first paying the assessed taxes on the unit pursuant to RSA 80:2A, and to authorize the town manager to sign a statement regarding the same.
So moved.
Joanna, did you get all that?
No, but I can go back.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Before we go back to the discussion items, is the board inclined to allow Mr. Bisson to come up so that he can go home?
No. If we're here, he has to be here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually a pleasant surprise. You have in your packet before you a memo asking for the ability to expend $85,000 out of the Park Improvement Capital Reserve Fund for the purchase of a playground for Park Street Common. As you noticed, this has been a long process. We started this in July. with 367 people responding to a survey. And then, Mr. Chair, Mr. Dean also attended a in-person information session at Park Street, which was well attended with over 50 people in attendance, and we got a lot of feedback. That feedback was then given to the playground manufacturers, and out of the 7 major playground manufacturers, 4 of them submitted various designs. We whittled it down to 2, and then finally voted on November 30th to go with the play and park structures of represented by the New England Recreation Group, and there's a picture in your packet as well of what it will look like. That will bring the total of the Park Improvement Capital Reserve Fund down. Currently is $116,000 in it, so doing the math real quick, it's about $31,000 left over.
Any questions for Mr. Bisson? Looks really nice, Greg.
Yeah, I can tell you the feedback we've gotten that people are thrilled. There'll be more swings, more things to do.
Well, it was well attended, and there was definitely interest in this, so I appreciate the expeditious nature of your work here.
And I will be coming back in the spring later on to discuss the fencing when I put that out to bid. I had a quote, but as we all know, prices are fluctuating, so we will have to bid it out again once the playground is installed. We had a current quote of about $14,000. We're expecting it to be about $15,000 to $16,000, so we have plenty of money in the fund to fund that.
Okay, all right, great.
That's, the fencing is 15, 16,000?
Yep, we're going with the black aluminum fencing, so it kind of blends in. We're not going chain link. We're gonna make sure it kind of blends in and not stick out like a sore thumb in a historical neighborhood.
All right, so 85 for the structure, 15, okay.
There are no other questions. I would entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $85,000 from the Parks Improvement Capital Reserve Fund
So
to
moved.
renovate Park Street Common Playground.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Still not enough swings.
Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
It's better than the 2 tot swings that are there currently, so.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bisson. Okay, back to discussion items. Next, we have the fiscal year 22 budget, bonds, and warrant articles. Mr. Dean, did you want to speak? We went through this at our last meeting. I think you have some updates for us.
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to point out that since the last meeting you've had, we have had some changes in health plans with our employees. So we've got a new bottom line number for the general fund, and that's $20,446,231. So that's an increase of give or take $70,000 from the last number that you had. That is a 2.65% increase over the adjusted budget, and a 2.79% increase over the unadjusted budget. The difference in the unadjusted versus the adjusted is the collective bargaining agreement that was approved by the voters, and we use that as part of our new base for the following year. So basically, we're looking at a 2.65% increase in the general fund. And other than that, I know I went over lots of things at the last meeting, and I know that we have a budget hearing coming up on the 18th, so I just put it back to the board with any questions or items that you want to discuss individually.
So we did go through this at our last meeting, and we will be taking up each warrant article at the January 18th budget hearing. So for the sake of time, I will canvass the board. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'll start Selectwoman Gilman.
Yeah, I did have a request from the Energy Committee to include $200 worth of dues for the local energy. Well, it's dues. It's not for CPCNH, it's for more local energy working group. I guess it would come under the planning department. In there.
Mr. Dean, do we have funds already in the budget that we could move to accommodate that, or would we have to?
It's not guaranteed.
Move a different figure? It's $200?
$200? Yeah, I think we could find that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Selectwoman Cowan?
No.
Okay. Selectwoman Routiola?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, too, I just wanted to say that in the packet tonight on page 3 and page 4 of the warrant are our collective bargaining agreements and the estimated cost of those agreements, so that needs to be disclosed publicly, so I'm doing that now by stating what they are, and they're on the record, and anybody who wants to see the cost can look in the packet and see what those numbers look like.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving on. We have a memo in our packet. The Public Works Department has secured a grant from the New Hampshire DES for the installation of a stormwater best management practice on Winter Street. The grant requires a match from the town of $79,306. The DPW has identified matching funds to be used of $29,700 for Salem Street and $7,020 for the town engineer's time. So they are recommending that the board allocate $42,586 of ARPA funds to provide the difference so the grant can move forward. Completion of this project will assist the town in its work on compliance with the EPA general permit. The project was discussed as part of the CIP during the FY22 budget season. Any questions or comments from the board? And seeing none, I would entertain a motion from the board to accept the New Hampshire DES Stormwater Best Management Practice Grant of $118,900 to further authorize the use of $42,586 of ARPA funds as a grant match for the project, and authorize the town manager to sign any document relative to the grant.
So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Mr. Dean, do you want to speak real quickly on the next grant, please?
Sure. This came up at the last meeting. This is the Department of Justice grant for $44,000 that was awarded to the police department for body-worn cameras, and as a matter of process, the board needs to accept that grant so we can utilize the funds.
Any questions or comments? And the amount of the award is $44,000?
$44,000.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion for the board to accept the grant amount of $44,000 from the Bureau of Justice Assistant for the body-worn camera implementation program as requested by the Exeter Police Department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And now we'll move into regular business, back to regular business. And Madam Clerk, we have 2 veterans credits, a solar exemption, and an abatement.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a veteran's credit in the amount of $500 for the following properties. Map 68, Lot 6, Unit 334, Map 75, Lot 17, Unit 35, and Map 52, Lot 36.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a solar exemption for Map 65, Lot 144, in the amount of $10,000 for the tax year 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a solar exemption for MAP 24, Lot 20, in the amount of $19,000 for the tax year 2022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, I move to approve an abatement for, Mr. Dean, do you know if this is what kind of abatement this is? Because I don't remember.
Mr. Dean, is it in the packet behind you?
It is. It's a tax abatement for Exeter Elms Campground.
Yep. Okay, so I looked through the things, but I didn't remember this one.
Okay.
A tax abatement for MAP 110, Lot 2, Unit 102, in the amount of $8.24 for the tax year 2021.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We also have a memo from the Finance Director informing the board of the IRS standard mileage rate, which was adopted for automatic approval by the Select Board in March of 2018. The standard mileage rate will be changing to 58.5 cents per mile for business drivers. Mr. Dean, we don't need to move that, do we?
No action.
Okay, thank you. And we have a request from the Exeter Fire Department, Assistant Fire Chief Paisan, for 2 address changes that the E911 committee is recommending to us. So the first, did you?
I just want to say it's a wacky situation to have the number 4 in between 12 and 14 and 16. That happened on Park Street, too.
So the motion would be to renumber 4 McKinley Street to 16 McKinley Street, Unit 1, the downstairs unit, and 16 McKinley Street, Unit 2, upstairs.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And the second motion would be to renumber 16 McKinley Street to 20 McKinley Street.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Neighbors better like each other.
And Mr. Dean, I will turn it over to you for town manager's report, please.
Okay. I did get a note from Principal Rawson today from the academy, and he said that most of the students came back today, provided they had a negative COVID test. All classes will be taught remotely this week while we conduct 2 rounds of pooled saliva testing. We hope to begin in-person extracurricular activities over the weekend, and in-person classes are tentatively scheduled to resume next Monday. All this depends, of course, on the pooled saliva test results and other relevant factors. They have a booster clinic set up for students on Wednesday, and Principal Rawson also offered to come to a future board meeting. So if you'd like to have him, he's more than happy to come.
I think ideally it would be the meeting after the 18th, because the budget meeting is going to go late.
Probably the 31st.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Very good. Okay. And just wanted to also let people know, this is sort of a first saying that our new MuniLink water and sewer billing software is almost ready to launch, and people will get their December bills. When they do get their December bills, that district will be able to log into a portal, and they'll also be able to ask for e-billing options. So we're beginning to make quite a few strides in that area. So just wanted to let you know that that's just about there. And that was all I had for tonight.
Great, thank you. Select Board Committee reports, Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan?
Nope.
And Selectwoman Gilman?
Nothing to report except for Wednesday, Thursday, and possibly Friday. I'll be sitting with the mostly 400 other people at the State House for veto overrides or sustaining and bills left over from earlier this year or last year. At least KN95s for everybody. Eat lunch in your car.
Yes.
No, these are the suggestions that came up. Just, wear gloves but that's it.
Okay, thank you. And I did not have any correspondence. We had a letter that was written to me by a resident on Windermere Lane requesting that we look into contacting Amtrak about the requirements of a quiet zone. And it's interesting information in the packet, Mr. Dean. Can your office, if you haven't already, reach out to Mr. Movitz?
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay.
I've been talking about this for a while with various people on the various stops along the way. And basically, the train horn, the Downeaster blows from East Kingston to Newmarket because of all the grade crossings and when they stop and when they start and how many yards it is, et cetera. And it is, when I was living down in Massachusetts, the same thing occurred on the Green Line in Newton. And they went back and forth on it, and that they had a quiet zone for a long time, and then a whole new set of people moved in and wanted to have it seemingly more safe. And then they went back to a quiet zone, which just involves gates, quite frankly. And I think we should consult with Mr. Bob Hall, because he probably knows more about how
we might be able to accomplish something like this.
Well, yeah, how Amtrak might help or not help.
Right. I know the supplemental, I think they're called supplemental security measures, the SSMs, have to be in place at all of your crossings to even be considered for a quiet zone. And the other thing I'd just say is I know a quiet zone establishment is a very long and involved process. So I don't want to leave the false impression that it's an easy thing to do. It's actually quite difficult. So, but we'll look into it.
Thank you. And the only other piece of correspondence was from the NHMA with the important dates leading up to the March election. Reviewing the board calendar, we meet again on January 18th, and that is the public budget hearing, which typically does go late. So, no non-public. Any other comment before we adjourn? And Mr. Dean, when we adjourn, I believe we will have a non-meeting with council to review
collective bargaining.
Okay. If there's anything else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. No, we have to go into non-public, right? What?
No, it's actually a non-meeting.
Meeting.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Good evening.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.